Hello, my spuds and buttons. I'm Vicky, this is Cat Mum Crafts, and this is my all new manner of historical hooking, or hooking historical, or whatever the hook I call it. So, I'd like to introduce someone to you. This is Uther, for reasons that will become clear. And you're going to join me in making Uther while I tell you all about one of England's possibly most famous, and I have to include Wales and Ireland in this one, but alright, so Britain's possibly most famous legends, King Arthur, and the Knights of the Round Table if I get time. Now, I've no idea where the sword in the stone came from, so I will clarify that now. It doesn't feature in Le Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Malory, which is heavily based on Geoffrey of Monmouth's history of Britain. So, I don't know. Nor is it in Geoffrey of Monmouth. So, sword in the stone aside, because I cannot trace that back to where it came, let's make Uther, and let's find out about King Arthur. I'll see you soon. Bye. So, we're going to start with actual verifiable historical fact. If King Arthur existed, it would have been round about 500 AD. So the earliest records of such a person appear in Bede's History of the English Church and its People, which is 8th century. He then reappears in Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of England, which is 12th century, and then Le Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Malory, as I previously mentioned, which is 15th century. So a lot of my information has come from those, along with the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, which would have started for Britain round about the same time, give or take. So, in 400 and something, the Roman Empire fell, but there were still Roman dignitaries and military dotting around in Britain at the time, including the offspring of the Emperor Constantine, who would have been in the area round about what is now York. The Anglo and Saxon invasion from Germany would have pushed the Romans westward to Cornwall, Wales, Ireland. So it's highly likely that if such a fella existed, he was a Romano-Celtic warlord. There were pagans still about at the time, particularly among what were called the Bretons, so the Celts that were running around in Cornwall and Wales and Ireland, which could give rise to the legend of Merlin. But Christianity was rising quite heavily. This ties in the timeline with the existence of Hengist and Horsa, who were known to have invaded Kent round about the turn of 500-ish. So, onto the actual legend itself. I need to take you back to before the Trojan War for the start of the story. Before the Trojan War, which was 1200-ish BC, Britain was peopled by giants, particularly a giant named Albion, which is where the old Roman name for Britain comes from, Alba. So after the Trojan War, this fella named Brutus comes from Greece through Europe, conquers Brittany, hint to the name again, and then conquers England, defeating the giant Albion. So the British Isles, as we know it, went from being Albion to Brutus, so Britain, via Brittany. He made his capital, some say near the Thames, but so London, as we would now know it, but there is some debate as to whether it was London or Winchester. So Brutus settles and people. Fast forward 1,700 years, the descendants of the Bretons, so once again the descendants of Brutus, and also the descendants of the Roman invasion and Constantine, are trundling around in England in the west. Because, as I've said, the Angles and the Saxons have invaded. Aided in some places by a southwestern king named Vortigern. Now, Vortigern wanted to build a castle. This is possibly where Winchester came into it, because Winchester is near enough both Cornwall and Kent to make a sensible middle ground, and at the time Britain was made up of lots of warring kingdoms. At one point, England alone had 15 or 16. That's without Wales, Scotland, Cornwall, and Ireland. So, Vortigern wanted to build a castle, but it wouldn't stand up. It kept on falling down. And so he got his soothsayer, who said that the blood of a boy with no father would make it stand. Now, this was Merlin. And Merlin came along and kept himself alive, essentially by saying that my blood won't solve the problem. It's the dragons battling underneath the castle. And they went and investigated, and indeed there were 2 dragons battling beneath the castle. A red dragon and a white one. Now, the red dragon... Sorry, I'm skipping ahead. Merlin then went on to say that the red dragon would defeat the white. And this indeed happened with the actual dragons. But what was unknown to Merlin at the time was that the red dragon was the sigil of the Principality of Wales, even then, and of the sons of the Emperor Constantine. And that the white dragon was the sigil of Vortigern. Now, Vortigern doesn't like this, obviously, but he doesn't put Merlin to death because he thinks he can use him. So, eventually, one of the sons of Vortigern, one of the heirs even of Constantine, descendants even, here's what's going on. And that was a bloke called Uther. So, Uther trundles down from York to what we assume is Winchester with his army. And guess what? Vortigern is defeated. And again, we can assume that Uther settles in Winchester. There's a few years of peace and quiet while the Saxons invade and they're defeated or not defeated. The Saxon invasion is an entirely different thing. It went on forever, a bit like the Viking invasion, 200-ish years later. But anyway, Uther is holding court and meets the Duke of Cornwall and his wife. And Uther falls in love with the Duke of Cornwall's wife and hatches a plot with Merlin, that sneaky Merlin who has appeared again, lays siege to Tintagel Castle. And whilst Tintagel Castle, which is the Duke of Duke of Cornwall's stronghold, I'm sorry, I completely forgot where I was going now. So the Duke of Cornwall goes out to see what's occurring. Uther has used some magic by Merlin to disguise himself as the Duke of Cornwall, and he merrily trundles along and has his way with the Duke of Cornwall's wife. Now, she falls pregnant, but meanwhile, the Duke of Cornwall has heard that Uther isn't there. So he comes back from trying to lift a siege and is killed. Please imply the use of inverted commas there. So Uther tells the truth and reveals himself, and we discover that he is in fact Uther. Now, the Duke of Cornwall's the late Duke of Cornwall's wife is pregnant by Uther, and so to avoid disgrace has to marry him. And this is Arthur. Oh, the cat's just...
Well, loves, after that gallop through the legend of King Arthur, you can now see why Uther is called Uther. He's kind of cute. I followed a video tutorial. I cannot for the life of me remember who it was, because he's been sat in my need to do a video about this cupboard for quite some time. But it will be linked in my playlist, or it will be in the playlist called Videos I've Used, because that's what I do. So, let me know if you liked this new-ish method of historical hooking, or hooking historical, or whatever it's called. This is my favourite segment, because it really does combine two things I adore: crochet and history. And for those of you who don't know, I got my degree in history and ancient history. So, in a few months, there'll be another poll out to see which historical figure we want to look at. Now, you should have seen my book look on the iconic women. So we'll be dabbling through that to have a quick look. I've only highlighted the ones where I can get some serious history on them, or at least a hefty chunk of legend. Plus a few women I like that I'm just going to do anyway, without the history. So yeah, that was that. I'm going to let you go on with the rest of your day, or afternoon, evening, morning, middle of the night, whenever you're watching. Please don't be watching in the middle of the night, because unless you are a night worker, you should be asleep, and sitting and watching things on your phone is not good for the old circadian rhythm. Consider yourselves told off. In the most caring and loving way. I'm babbling now, so I'm going to get on with my day. I'm going to let you get on with your time period. Look after yourselves, please, and that includes not watching YouTube in the middle of the night, both physically and mentally, because if you don't look after yourselves, you can't look after anybody else. I'm just watching my phone reflection bounce in my glasses now. I'm sorry. And I would miss you if you were poorly. In the immortal words of Bill and Ted, and what King Arthur tried to do, be excellent to one another. And as ever, love you 9000. Bye!